Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. I've got to tell you, I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're going to completely dismantle a myth that has honestly been exhausting students for generations. I'm talking about the whole hustle culture trap. You know, that completely outdated idea that just staring at your desk for more hours automatically equals better grades. Yeah, no. Whether you're stressing over a massive state exam or literally sitting in an eighth grade classroom right now just trying to get ready for high school, the actual science of learning, it stays exactly the same. So get ready, because we are going to figure out how to stop burning out and start actually studying with your brain's biology in mind.
Okay, let's kick this off by comparing two very different types of learners. Picture this. We got student A, who has been grinding away for 6 straight hours. They're jittery on their third cup of coffee and frantically highlighting notes and just rereading the textbook over and over. Now compare that to student B, who put in, maybe 2 hours? They're well rested, completely calm, and they spent their short study time doing really targeted, active review. Come exam day, who do you think absolutely destroys the curve? Spoiler alert, it's student B.
So that brings us to the million-dollar question, right? Why did the student who studied way less actually get the better grade? I know, it seems completely counterintuitive, but I promise you, by the end of this explainer, we are going to uncover the specific, scientifically proven strategies that give student B the ultimate advantage. We're talking real biological hacks and structural techniques that will literally give you the upper hand on that next eighth grade algebra quiz. All right, so here is our quick roadmap for today. First, the foundation, then mastering your notes, managing time and tasks, active review and recall, and finally, hacking the exam environment. Let's get right into it. Starting off with Section 1, the foundation, also known as the actual science of learning. Imagine you're sitting in your eighth grade science class and you hear a totally new concept. At first, it temporarily encodes in a part of your brain called the hippocampus. Basically, this is your short-term memory. It's kind of like a super messy temporary workspace where new information is just rattling around. But to actually ace a test, you need to turn that short-term rattling into permanent long-term knowledge stored way over in the neocortex. Well, how do you do that? It's all about repeated exposure and rest. As your brain cells grow new connections to store all this data, they literally require sleep. Sleep acts like, Miracle Grow for the branches of your brain. It physically moves data from that temporary holding cell right into permanent long-term storage. Which leads us perfectly to this absolute gem of a quote from Benjamin Franklin: "By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail." Because, let's be real, your brain isn't naturally hardwired to make these long-term focused decisions, so you have to build an external structure to help it out. By planning your study schedule well in advance, you avoid the dreaded cram session. See, cramming just totally overloads that short-term memory workspace we just talked about, making it biologically impossible for the information to transfer over to the neocortex.
Moving right along to Section 2, mastering your notes, or in other words, getting the input right.
Now, this is fascinating. A 2014 Princeton study compared note-taking methods and found that laptop users typed way more words. We're talking an average of 310 words compared to just 173 words written by the old-school paper and pen users. But here's the real kicker. The laptop users actually retained significantly less information. Wild, right? Why? Because they were just mindlessly transcribing syntax. They were basically acting like human tape recorders, typing letter for letter what the teacher said, instead of pausing to actually digest the meaning of the lesson. To really process that meaning, you absolutely need a system. Here are 3 highly effective ones you can try. There's the outline method, which just uses nice hierarchical bullet points. The Cornell method, where you divide your page up into cues, notes, and a summary section. Or mind mapping, which lets you draw these big visual webs connecting concepts. Pick whichever one fits your brain best. But hey, the ultimate pro tip here is to physically tag your notes. Like when you're sitting in class and the teacher says something that confuses you, don't just politely gloss over it. Draw a giant star next to it. That way, when it's time to review, your eyes are going to jump straight to your weak spots. It'll save you hours of uselessly rereading stuff you already know perfectly well. Also, if you're ever really strapped for time, you can totally hack your input using the read backwards technique. Basically, do not start at page 1 of a textbook chapter. Start at the summary. Read the key points at the back, then skim the bold headings and charts, and only then read the first and last paragraphs of each section. Doing this builds a solid mental framework first. Then it becomes incredibly easy to just slot all those little detailed facts into your brain later on. Okay, on to Section 3, managing time and tasks, which is all about the process. You absolutely need to know about Parkinson's Law. This is the rule that states work will literally expand to fill whatever time you give yourself to complete it. Like if you give yourself 3 days to write an 8th grade history report, well, it takes 3 days. But give yourself just 3 hours and boom, you'll miraculously get it done in 3 hours. You can totally hack this by deliberately giving yourself a 10 to 20% tighter deadline for an assignment. Set a timer, force your brain into a state of high focus, and just watch how much faster you finish. It's like magic. To schedule a study session properly, try dividing your work up into fixed tasks and variable tasks. Making 20 flashcards, that's a fixed task. It takes a very concrete, defined amount of time. But writing an essay, that's variable. Thanks to Parkinson's Law, it'll inflate to eat up your whole night if you let it. So the secret is to always tackle your more mindless, fixed tasks first. Doing that creates a hard constraint that prevents your big, variable, creative tasks from just swallowing your entire study session whole. And hey, the power of spacing out your tasks applies to literally everyone, even literal doctors. Check this out. A 2006 study looked at medical residents learning how to suture arteries. Group A crammed all their training into one single, grueling day. Group B, on the other hand, studied for the exact same amount of total time, but spaced it out over 4 weeks. 1 month later, Group B drastically outperformed Group A. See, spacing out your review allows your brain the necessary rest to transfer that knowledge over to the neocortex. Cramming loses every single time, guys. No contest. That brings us to Section 4, Active Review and Recall, which is the output stage. The most crucial point here is overcoming what scientists like to call the illusion of competence. Look, rereading a textbook and aggressively highlighting everything feels incredibly productive, right? But because all the information is sitting right there in front of your eyes, it gives you a totally false sense of security. You don't actually know it. Instead, you've got to use active retrieval. Close the book. Quiz yourself. When you struggle, when you rack your brain and make mistakes, that exact process is literally what updates and strengthens the memory long term. Making mistakes is actual biological proof that you are learning. You can even supercharge this active retrieval with a neat technique called interleaving. So instead of studying math for 3 hours straight, you mix it all up. Do a little math, then switch over to science, maybe toss in some history, and then jump back to math. Cycling through different subjects like this forces your brain to temporarily forget the information and then work really hard to retrieve it again. That mental friction, that's what builds those incredibly strong neural connections. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Hacking the Exam Environment. Did you know that memory is highly context-dependent? Get this. Back in 1975, researchers actually had people put on full scuba gear and learn vocabulary words underwater. Seriously, later, when they tested them, the subjects recalled the words vastly better when they went back underwater than when they tried to remember them on dry land. The big takeaway for us? Try to replicate your test constraints as best as you can. Do at least one practice study session sitting in your actual classroom or a really similar room using a timer with absolutely no notes. Now, when you're studying at home and you just hit a total wall, try a little trick called rubber duck debugging. This is actually a super famous computer programmer hack. If you don't understand a problem, explain your entire thought process out loud to a literal rubber duck or, a stuffed animal or your dog. Explaining it forces you to view the problem from a non-expert perspective, which honestly often magically reveals the solution. But hey, if you're still stuck after 15 minutes of trying to get it line by line, that is exactly when you should probably go ask your teacher for help. Okay, now imagine you are finally sitting in that exam room. You've got to beware of the sunk cost fallacy. If you're taking your 8th grade state exam and question number 4 completely stumps you, swallow your ego. Seriously, do not sit there for 20 minutes refusing to move on just because you already invested 5 minutes trying to figure it out. Abandon ship. Skip to the easier questions, build up some real momentum and confidence, and just come back to the tough ones at the very end. And right before you actually walk into that room, give the power pose pregame a shot. Yes, I know it feels completely ridiculous, but the science absolutely backs it up. Go to the bathroom, stand in private like Superman or Wonder Woman, hands on your hips, chest totally expanded, and just take some deep breaths. Striking this pose literally alters your blood chemistry. It reduces the stress hormone cortisol and boosts your testosterone, making you scientifically more confident and prepared to tackle the test. Let's wrap up with one final reminder, which brings us right back to where we started: your biology. Do not forget to use your ultimate tools. Getting up from your desk to go get some exercise is not a waste of time. Exercise releases dopamine, which basically acts like the brain's save button for all that information you just studied. On top of that, taking a cheeky afternoon nap gives you a double burst of alpha brainwaves, which is literally the optimal state for acquiring knowledge. You're not slacking off, you are maintaining the machine. So, that brings us to our final thought for today. Are you ready to stop studying hard and start actually studying smart? Hustle culture constantly wants you to believe that exhaustion is some sort of badge of honor. But as we've seen throughout this explainer, whether it's through spacing out your retrieval, interleaving your subjects, or just taking a well-deserved nap, the real badge of honor goes to the student who understands their own brain. So take these strategies, ditch the all-nighters once and for all, and go absolutely ace that next exam. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.